Good morning, Neverland! This is Vaguely Scientific. Hello, I'm a nocturnal placental flying mammal, a member of the family Pterididinae, or Pterididintae. If you can't tell, I am Derek. Joining me, as always, the ever-impressive, the long-contained but never duplicated Jim, the scientist. Hi, Jim.
Applause.
And you think monkeys, mosquitoes, and lions are bad? That's just the beginning. Our guest this week is Chris. Hi, Chris.
Last time I was here, there was a tornado warning, so that ought to tell you something.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
It did just start raining here, like right before we started recording.
I don't think there's any tornadoes in the forecast, but...
You never know.
It did get a lot cloudier outside than it was this afternoon, so...
I'm like, right before we started recording, it started raining here, and now that you point that out, I think that's a little suspicious.
The word you're looking for is ominous.
Mm-hmm.
And foreboding.
Indeed.
All right, well, let's get this taken care of then. This is the show where listeners send in questions to hear our vaguely scientific answers, and who knows, we might even answer them before there's a tornado warning. But first, it's time for the fun science fact of the day, Jim.
All right. I found this one out by accident, and I thought it was fascinating, and I looked into it, and there are a couple rivers that are extremely old. The Finke River in Australia is considered the oldest river in the world because it cuts through several of the mountain ranges that were formed by the Alice Springs Origin Sea, which occurred around 350 million years ago. And one of the reasons we know that it formed before the mountains is because the mountains are going one way and the river's going through them, and it couldn't have eroded through the mountains like perpendicular.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a couple in the eastern United States that are also extremely old, including the Susquehanna River, which is apparently about 300 million years old.
Oh,
so
wow.
it predates the end Permian mass extinction and the Appalachian Mountains.
I've been in that river. I don't recommend it. Penn's Creek, on the other hand, great for inner tubing.
Ooh, that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend any of the rivers in our immediate vicinity.
No.
Jim, you probably answered this, and I just don't remember what you said, but how did you discover this by accident?
There was a post. I joined the geography subreddit because there are a lot of really interesting tidbits of information on there. And somebody posted a Google Links Earth of the Susquehanna River, and it cuts straight through the Appalachian Mountains. And they're like, how? And so, like, I read through the explanation. I was like, I wonder if there are any rivers older than that. And it turns out the one in Australia is.
Huh.
Well, there you go.
Well, neat.
Yeah.
So Australia doesn't just want to kill you, it also wants to kill mountains.
Who doesn't?
Australia just wants to kill everyone and everything.
Or Freddy versus Jason versus Australia.
I'd watch that.
Yeah.
Same.
I
Yeah.
wonder if Crocodile Dundee would be in it.
Maybe.
I think perhaps we should probably move on to at least one of our questions for this week.
All right.
So question 1 this week. In Arthurian legend, Merlin is said to know the future because he lives in reverse. What does that mean? And what could that mean? And what would that be like?
Confusing.
That is 3 questions. Just saying.
Yeah, true. Good point. Yeah, I don't know how you do that, because, like, you have to be able to react to what's going on immediately around you, and if you're going backwards, you might react to the wrong thing.
Well, if time is a continuum, or not if time is like static, you already have reacted the way you're going to.
Oh.
I think that's how you get past all these shenanigans.
So there is no free will.
There is no free will. Well, I've often said if we can predict the future, then there can't be. Like if we can predict the future and not change it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
this really doesn't answer the question, but it is. I'm a literature nerd, and it's related pretty directly.
Yeah, fair.
So I was curious where the idea of Merlin living backwards actually comes from, and what's interesting is it is pretty widely regarded as canon in Arthurian legend, despite the fact that it seems to have been created in the 20th century by T.H. White in The Once and Future King.
Huh.
Really?
And because his Once and Future King was famously the inspiration for the film Sword in the Stone, the Disney animated movie. It is one of the best known and most adapted versions of Arthurian myth. And when he originally did that, he wanted to give Merlin, because there's a lot of anti-war stuff in that book, and which makes sense. And Merlin is kind of T.H. White's, like, I guess, voice in that book. So he wanted to say, like, he wanted to play with, he sees the future, so T.H. White can use his knowledge of the present to inform what Merlin would know.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where that comes from.
Okay.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense too. Like, I think that's a really cool way to sort of like, to elude the problem of the audience surrogate situation.
Sure. And it still doesn't really get to, because Merlin was already a soothsayer and was able to see the future.
Yeah,
but it is that specific detail of he lives his life backwards that that really creates this whole discussion we're about to have.
So if you're talking about somebody going backwards, basically going backwards through time, the really confusing thing I can think of is, you know how there's like backmasking in some tracks? I'm thinking of a couple of Weird Al tracks, Nature Trail to Hell, a couple of Beatles tracks.
Mm-hmm.
What if you're doing if you have a person that's basically doing that all the time?
Oh, interesting.
I was thinking a little bit about, there are more problems with this, like ontological paradoxes that arise, but I was just thinking, if you were used to going backwards speaking, that would sound normal to you. Like, that would just be how you talk.
Right.
So like all music that you listen to, like, I wonder if Merlin just never really got into music until the Beatles recorded Revolution 9. Like, then it was like, oh, I get this one.
Yeah.
Not that, I mean, there obviously have been more than that, but that's the first one I thought of.
Right. I was thinking a little bit about Doctor Who on this one. Maybe
of
for
course
the reason
you were.
Yeah. Maybe for the reason you're thinking, maybe not.
Time is involved.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Specifically, I was thinking of the way that the character River Song kind of met the Doctor in reverse order.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And
yeah.
It made me start wondering, maybe Merlin isn't living in reverse order necessarily, but is actually like dipping in and out of the timeline sort of in the exact opposite order that everyone else is. So like he has a normal cause and effect like relationship with his own timeline, but with our timeline, or I guess with like King Arthur's timeline, he's like going backwards basically.
I had that thought, and it makes sense that you bring up River Song because I thought of Slaughterhouse-Five, which is very similar kind of, because correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not necessarily that River Song and the Doctor meet in reverse order. It's that they're just out of order.
Mm-hmm.
Or am I wrong about that?
I mean, you're not wrong. It's predominantly backwards, but there are some things where it's just regular out of order, and sometimes they actually like sync up apparently. So
yeah, well, because the idea is like she keeps this journal and she's like, which of these have we done yet?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And Slaughterhouse-Five does an interesting thing with, like, if we're tying it to this Merlin question of the main character, Billy Pilgrim, living his life out of order, where he'll just randomly jump into various segments, but he will live chronologically forward, and then we'll just jump to a different scene. And what's interesting about that to me, and the way that I kind of think that Merlin could work, is there are moments when Billy Pilgrim is young, but it keeps saying that he has lived this part of his life thousands of times, but he still acts like it is the first time because that's the way he did act at the time and therefore always will.
Yeah, yeah.
And like that's why Merlin can't like see the outcome of Lancelot and Guinevere and Mordred and all that. He can't see that outcome and then try to change it. He like always has to be consistent with what he did.
So that would make it like a predestination paradox then.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting take on it because, I mean, no matter what happens, I feel like that there are a number of predestination paradoxes that have to occur to make this actually work.
I mean, yeah. I think being able to tell the future with magic, I mean, like there has to be some unchangeable things or else you're just, I predict this is going to happen. Okay, well, I'm not going to go there. Oh, guess I was wrong.
Fixed points in time.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I predict you're going to trip when you go down the stairs tomorrow. And it's like, oh, well, I took the elevator because you told me that. I was like, oh, well, that prediction was just completely wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. It depends on how much free will you're allowed to wiggle out of the situation.
Yeah. Another thing that I looked at with the wording of the question, what could that mean? I know this is not the intent, but I kind of looked at the idea of a person starting as an old man and growing to be a baby, and I looked at Benjamin Button.
Okay.
Okay.
And it's been a long time since I saw that movie, but one fundamental problem I've always had with that movie is when Benjamin Button is born, he's not really like a full-grown old man. He's a baby who looks old. And then he gets bigger and then ultimately turns into a regular baby later, which is weird.
Yeah, that is a little weird, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It should be like a baby that is the size of a full-grown adult.
Yeah. Like, I don't know.
I like how quickly we accepted that.
At some point, it just breaks down, right?
I mean, why not?
Yeah.
We're already accepting the premise that he is aging in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there's a certain level of it raises more questions than it answers, and like the people making that movie are like, oh, please don't think about that.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing, but I feel like the quote unquote canon is that Merlin does look older the further forward in time we get. So I guess he's not like aging in reverse order.
Yeah, it's hard to say because Merlin is usually depicted as the perpetually old bearded wizard.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
Aside from there is a made-for-TV miniseries starring Sam Neill that came out in I want to say like 1998 or something. But it's very cheesy and has a lot of bad special effects like from the time. And I think Martin Short is in it. But it is honestly one of my favorite adaptations of Arthurian legend because like while it follows the story is Merlin as a young man grows up and becomes the famous Merlin that we know.
Oh, okay.
But it throws so much of the stuff that we don't usually see in Arthurian legend into this film. But they don't do anything with him living in reverse. They just do like he has the ability to foresee the future and tries really hard to circumvent things that he can't.
Yeah, the series is called Merlin. It's a 2-episode series.
Yeah.
Sam Neill, Helena Bonham Carter is Morgan Le Fay.
Yeah. And they did Morgan Le Fay is Mordred's mother in that version. And so they do take some liberties, but it's like a fairly good adaptation from a writing standpoint. So if you can watch it, I do recommend it.
That's interesting. That sounds kind of like a really fun adaptation on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might have to see if I can look that up.
I mean, be prepared for like 90s CGI, but it is.
Yeah.
but that aside.
Yeah.
I think that it's also worth mentioning and worth thinking about the fact that Merlin might just be lying the whole time.
I mean,
He's just really good at guessing. Maybe he's doing a lot of cold reading, and he can just like really piece together the situation by just asking the right yes or no questions.
it would explain a lot.
He's that kind of soothsayer that's like something happened, and he's like, I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, wait, how did you know? And then like people forget, and then like years later they'll be like, did he actually predict it, or did he just tell you about it later?
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. He's like, yes, I saw it in the stars. And it's like, well, you also could have figured that out if you had been watching the last 45 minutes of this battle.
Yeah.
They were flanking us. We were over there. You could have figured that out if you were, mostly asleep.
Watch out, that guy's gonna stab you. How did you know?
Oh, it's just a long knife he's got.
Yeah, is it one of those things where he's actually predicting the future, or does he roll 20s on his perception checks all the time?
Yeah.
He's a very quick thinker.
His passive perception is through the roof. Now, actually, I don't really know a whole lot about, well, for starters, I don't know a whole lot about which chunks of the Arthurian legend are like the quote-unquote canon, or like what stuff came later. Like for example, this, you said, came in the 20th century or whatever. So I don't really know what powers Merlin has beyond his like ability to see the future, basically. Like, does he have the power to throw fireballs or anything like that?
I mean, it is inconsistent. It depends on what story you're telling. Sometimes Merlin is the most powerful being in the world, but still bound by like fey magic, so he can't interact with the human world. And other times Merlin is mortal, but like just has fortune telling powers, and so something I think that's interesting about this question is like it doesn't necessarily depend on it being specifically Merlin for us to answer the question. Cause like,
oh, true. Yeah.
We've already talked about like living like Memento. Like, remember the movie? Like the scenes play out forward, but like when a scene ends, it jumps to the previous scene.
There was
so like that's the way.
I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to mention this, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to work this into the episode. There was an XKCD about this, where they talk about how Merlin kind of like lives his life back to front, and they were like, oh, that must be pretty rough. And he's like, yeah, towards the end of his life, he just started sitting around and watching a lot of TV, and it smash cuts to Merlin watching Memento, and he's like, this movie makes perfect sense.
Oh, okay.
That's good.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I want to mention that so bad, but I can't figure out how to work it in. So I'm glad you brought up Memento. Oh, what about this? What if Merlin has already just lived once and then, for whatever reason, had to go back to the beginning and do it all over again, but everything's exactly the same? So he already's like, that's going to happen. That tree's going to fall. This guy's going to get hit with a baseball.
It's the same events, but it's slightly lower. Like the Futurama thing?
Yeah. 3 feet lower.
It's just 3 feet lower.
Yeah, because I'm like, if I went back and watched Memento, I was like, oh yeah, I know what to look for now. Merlin has already seen Earth 1, and now is going back through his second watch.
I mean, it's a little Groundhog's Day, right? Like,
oh yeah, true.
Yeah.
If you look at the scenes where Bill Murray's character is like repeating a scene over and over again to like get things perfectly right and like reevaluate timing and stuff, like you have to think he lived the entire day every one of those times.
Yeah. And wasn't it like 35 years or something like that?
Depends on I remember there's like different ways to count it, if you count every scene as an independent day, or if you somebody calculated the minimum amount of days it had to be, and it was like multiple years.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find that. I remember seeing that too.
It was like, and it was like a conservative estimate, like assuming you mixed some of the scenes together and said they were on the same day. It's like it would still take at least this number of days.
It's like, what culture combined various time durations assumptions and estimated that Phil spent a total of 12,395 days, just under 34 years.
Oh, jeez.
I,
Yeah, maybe Merlin's just stuck in one long Groundhog's life.
Groundhog's Life.
Yeah, he's just doing it over and over.
I feel like Groundhog's Life is better than Groundhog Day.
It would be less monotonous.
Yeah.
not by much.
No.
This is tangential to the question, but I've thought about this before where people are like, if you could go back in time in your life and like change something, where would you go? Like that idea. And I've thought about like people whose answers are, I would go back to like high school and do this differently, or I would go back to when I was young and do this differently. And I'm like, but you would either have to remember so much of the day-to-day of your life when you were young, or you would basically change one thing and then make the rest of your life equally unpredictable.
Right, yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know that I'd want to do that at all.
Right. Yeah, because if you go back too far, like if you go back a year before the thing you want to change, then you are almost certainly going to change it, but it'll just create a cascade failure where you won't be able to like navigate back around that. So
Yeah.
I think another thing that is possible, but again, I mean, it's all dependent on whether or not like certain things are canon with Merlin, where it's just like, maybe he's an alien. Maybe he's just a space alien and they just have like advanced knowledge of these kinds of things. Or he's a time traveler with no special powers at all. It's just that he has gone back in time with the historical knowledge that like, oh, this battle happened and this is the outcome, and like is able to piece that kind of stuff together. Like that's actually, I like that better than the alien, because the alien was just me being silly. But that's like, oh, that's a mundane explanation for as mundane as time travel.
I mean, Alien isn't too far away from like there are a lot of versions where he is a fairy creature himself, or he is descended of demons or something like that. What you're describing is kind of close. I would say closer to the Once and Future King version, where he's more just a teacher and he teaches young Arthur like all these lessons from the future, and like what war can cause people to be in pain, and this is how science works, and this is how blah blah blah, with the exception that he's also able to transform him into various animals. That's still magical.
I mean, maybe he's just got a bunch of costumes.
Good.
They're just playing dress up.
Yeah. I mean, if at that time frame, like you see someone with a really good costume, like what about like a mascot costume? You roll out with one of those and they're gonna be like, that guy's a wolf.
What? I don't know if they would. I don't know.
Like nowadays you can go to Disney and it's like, oh, it's Goofy. But you put that Goofy mask on in 1321 and everyone's gonna be like, oh boy, we gotta go.
Boy, we gotta go. Oh, that was good. All right, listeners, let us know what your life living backwards is like. But in the meantime, we should move on to our second question for this week. And that comes to us from David Jones. Is there life on Mars?
Just some sailors fighting in the dance hall.
So question 3 this week comes to us from Kevin. Why do we continue to live in a state where the air hurts our face?
I mean, presumably there are other things that we like about this state, but I admit I'm kind of having trouble coming up with them at the moment.
I think we should lead off like at the risk of pinpointing ourselves too closely. We live in like the mid-Atlantic, so we experience all 4 seasons, sometimes in one day.
Yeah.
So
sometimes in the space of an hour.
Yeah.
I want to say I don't know why Kevin chooses to live in a state where the air hurts his face, but
yeah.
Oh, there's so many. I don't know if I want to be argumentative. I feel like I want to be argumentative because I am a winter person. I like the winter, and I cannot fathom living during the summer in somewhere like Florida or Georgia or like further south. And some people love that. So like to some degree, my answer to this is, it's your own personal preference.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things that sort of brings up is that every region in the world has very specific weather to them.
Sure.
We get our 4 seasons here. And in the South, especially like the American Southeast, they don't get a whole lot of winter, but they do get some pretty intense summers. But one thing that we don't have in this area that a lot of places have is like really severe weather. We'll get a blizzard from time to time, but that's about as bad as it gets. And that's not really anything that's going to be tremendously bad, because a lot of times, the blizzard comes through, we get 6 to 8 inches of snow, and then by 2 or 3 days later, the roads are clear, everything's back to normal. We don't see the kinds of things like hurricanes or tornadoes. I know earthquakes are not technically weather, but like, here I like it because it's very like weather stable. And I think that's something that I would be concerned about if I moved somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point, because I know people who have at one time or still do live in places like North Carolina, specifically like the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And like every year, hurricane season is a little nerve-wracking if you know people who live in those areas.
Right.
But people still live there, and I've been there. It's nice there. It's you're by the ocean. You can swim. The weather's usually pretty okay. But what's interesting this year is the hurricane that just went through. They were actually experiencing dangerous weather further inland than they usually do. So that's kind of interesting.
How much of that is because of climate change? That's my question.
Right.
I mean, yeah, probably a lot of it. I know that like the mountainous regions were getting hit more than like closer toward the coast, and it's just that's unusual.
Yeah. There have been here and there a couple hurricanes that have done some really interesting things inland. And one of the ones that I remember, because I watched a documentary about this when I was a kid, was Hurricane Hazel. And I believe this was 1954. And it hit South Carolina. And it was going like 60 miles an hour. So it made it all the way up to Toronto, and it was still a tropical storm. And in Toronto, it merged with a low pressure system and became like, we occasionally get them, they call them superstorms, where like a tropical and non-tropical system merged together. And it was really bad for that area of Canada because they are not used to that kind of weather, because the amount of flooding, the amount of wind that they got was just really out of place. So like inland effects are rare, but I think kind of to Chris's point, I think that they are starting to become a lot more common because of the climate change.
Well, I'm thinking, tying that back to like where people live and whether you choose to live there or whatever, there are places where you have earthquakes. Right. And so they build precautions for those because you're not constantly having earthquakes. Right. And even I'm sure there are people who live further north than we do that experience more of a winter weather, and they just take more precautions and they don't go out wearing swim shorts and t-shirts all the time. But
yeah.
Something I don't really have a lot to say about this point, but I wanted to at least get it in here and maybe see what you guys think. But like the phrasing of the question doesn't mention a choice. So like, why do we continue to live there? Well, some people don't have another option is another thing.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it depends on where you're born, what you started with.
Right.
Yeah, I think people often underestimate how many resources it takes to move from place to place, even if you're just moving in your own city.
Yeah. I mean, I guess typically what most people would consider like a really nice place to live, at least of the people I know, pretty much most people think Hawaii would be a pretty desirable place to live.
They got volcanoes.
They do have volcanoes, but like even assuming they are correct, assuming it's just perfect there, perfect weather, and you'd enjoy it, it's really expensive to move to Hawaii.
Yeah.
A lot of the places I think it'd be fun to live are also very expensive. So,
yeah.
And sometimes you got to watch because, like, even wrapping back around to like earthquakes, because we move a little bit south and you end up in like Tennessee, Kentucky, in that area. There's a hidden fault line down there, the New Madrid Fault, and they had like a 7+ on the Richter scale earthquake in that area back in the 1800s. And I mean, they don't really stop to. They haven't really changed the building codes in that area because it happens so infrequently. And it's like, well, what about that?
Yeah. It's like why did the people at Pompeii continue living by Pompeii?
Yeah.
I don't know that
Pompeii didn't have building codes though, so.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. And I just don't think they were prepared for it.
I don't know anything about Pompeii building codes. Maybe they did have those.
They might have. I don't know.
That's an alley question.
Did Pompeii have building codes? Questions I never thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
Oh, the things that we end up Googling on this show.
I know, right?
We're on lists.
This is because I'm an artist and I often look things up for reference, and I tend to draw like fantasy characters and a lot of horror type things of late that I've been like trying to get better at. So like the image searches and the things that Google decides to tell Amazon I might be interested in purchasing, I'm like, please stop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking about was just that they have, like, if you go to a different place, then you feel it differently than the people who have lived there for a long time. One time, Justin and I, for work, drove all the way across the country to Los Angeles, and it was so funny. We were going to the one school there. This is actually San Diego. We went there first and then back to Los Angeles, but we went to the one school there. And it was like 67 degrees out that morning. So Justin and I roll up in like our t-shirts and our slacks and our khakis. And all of the kids were going into the school with like winter coats and scarves and beanies. And I'm like, you're going to die. You're going to get like heat stroke in those. And they were so cold. It's like 67 degrees.
67 degrees in Southern California is freaking blizzard weather.
I was going to say, that's exactly what they were treating it like. It was so funny. Yeah. And then we rolled up, and Justin had like khaki shorts on. I had khaki pants, but he was like in shorts and a t-shirt. And I'm like, man, we must look strange to them if they look strange to us.
It's California. Yeah. I guess it's weird how used to it you can get. Because like, I know for me personally, like it is... soon as there's a little bit of snow, I notice people start getting really upset about like driving, and yes, snow can be hazardous on the roads, but like I've lived here my entire life. It's snowing. You're going to be fine. Like sometimes.
Well, I mean, yeah, probably, but half the people don't know how to drive in snow.
Yeah.
Well, that's an issue I wish we could correct systematically.
Yes.
Or systemically or whatever. I don't know. People should learn to drive before they do it.
Yeah. My one friend went down and lived in Virginia for about a year, and they got, I think, 1/4 inch of snow. Like it was a light dusting that did stick on the grass, but not the roads. And it just like shut the whole city down.
So what do we do?
Yeah, well, and I get it, because like they don't have salt trucks and plows and stuff, but it didn't even stick on the roads. So it was like, come on.
You do that in northern Florida, they just like, nope.
Yeah.
That's a very good point that they're not prepared for it, though, because we're talking about like if you live in a place that has earthquakes, you're going to be prepared for earthquake. We have funding allocated to road services like plows and salt trucks and stuff, so that because we know every year there's going to be at least some use for that.
Yeah, I'm kind of on your point of California deals with earthquakes. Do you guys remember the earthquake we had 12 years ago?
I remember that it happened. I was driving at the time, so I totally missed it.
Yeah, I was at work at the time, and half the people are panicking, and the other half, it's like, what happened?
Yeah.
I've heard of it, and I know that I was alive during it. I just do not remember it happening.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I remember that.
But on the plus side, like we'll get like a 4 or a 5 on the Richter scale around here, but we're never going to get like a 7 or an 8. I hope.
Yeah.
If we do, something bad has happened. In more ways than one. Like, obviously, that is a bad thing in and of itself, but like something bad in the Earth's crust has happened.
Yep.
We are not on a fault line.
Oh, so what does it take then?
For what? Oh, an earthquake?
For us to have an earthquake.
I mean, I think that we'd have to have like if there was some kind of serious rifting event in the like beneath our plate, which I am confident without even looking it up that that's not something that's in the cards. So it's
okay.
That's apparently theoretically what happened down in the like the New Madrid fault area though with like Arkansas and that area is that I can't remember exactly when this happened. It was several 100 million years ago, but there was a failed rift. Like it started to rift and then it stopped. And there's a weakness still in that section of the crust that allows it to kind of jostle itself around in ways that you wouldn't normally see in the middle of a continent. So, but that's also why they're super rare, is because they are not near like an actual active plate boundary.
I want to know where the nearest fault line is to us now.
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
I only know the name of one fault line, and it is nowhere near us.
No.
San Andreas?
Yep.
I mean, the New Madrid one is probably, I mean, I don't know how far away like the Atlantic plate ends out in the middle, or not the Atlantic plate, like, but the plate boundary in the Atlantic Ocean. That's got to be further than Arkansas.
You would think so.
I want to say that, like, because we've gone on several tangents now, and I was thinking about it while you were talking about earthquakes some more, because it's closer to an answer to the question than I expected it to be. And I'm just interested. I find it interesting that we went in this direction because, like, why do I continue to live here? Well, because here's all the bad things about other places you could live.
True.
So, like, pick your poison, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is, like, I grew up here, so I'm, like, inured to the bad things that do happen here.
Yeah, they don't seem so bad to me. And
Same, although I grew up actually a few hours east of where we are now.
Oh, true, yeah.
And there are some other things that I won't go back there, not to live anymore. I became a city boy.
Because we have a few people, Sierra and Kelly are the two that live, that are panelists on the show that live in California. Mm-hmm. And anytime talking to them about like snowing, like as soon as it's the winter, I'm like, oh, I love when it starts snowing. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, I will never go back to Pennsylvania. I will never go back because of snow. And I'm like, but it's great.
Yeah.
I know somebody who lived in Tampa until recently, or actually I should say, okay, here we go with time tenses because as of this recording, said person is planning on moving back. When this episode comes out, it will have happened.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So
that's lovely.
Or at least they say it's going to happen. I will believe it when I see it. Or
at the time
have
of recording.
Seen it. This is why I hate time travel. The tenses get so confusing.
Yeah.
We'll also find out because it might happen. You might have seen it and you still might not believe it. You know, we don't know.
That's true.
You can't predict that.
Given the person in question, yeah, that's totally possible.
It's possible just by mentioning it, we've changed the future.
Oh no!
Oh god!
Chris actually came back in time to record this episode to prevent some calamity. That's what happened, and you've already done it. And you don't need to tell us what it is because the danger is we'll go ahead and make it happen anyway.
Which is good because I think by traveling back in time to do that, I forgot what it was in the first place.
Because you've erased it from the future and now it never happened.
Exactly. What the crap?
Oh man.
I am, as they say, confuzzled.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a good place to be here on this show.
Yep.
I think that another thing that's worth mentioning, though, and we sort of started with this, but I think it'd be fun to expand on it, is just the fact that, like, where we are, we are just comfortable. Like,
Yeah.
you know where the grocery store is. You know where the I don't know, your favorite restaurant is, for instance. You know your way around your area, and to go somewhere else, even if it's not all that far away, you have to kind of relearn. Like, if I moved 4 miles across the city, I would have to relearn my commute. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's not going to stop me from moving necessarily. Like, that's a trivial thing. But, when you're comfortable and things aren't bad and there's no reason to move, then, you're comfortable.
I moved, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
All of about 2 miles. But I still had to relearn where everything was, which grocery stores do you go to.
Mm-hmm.
Everything.
I mean, that gets to like an interesting point because once again, revisiting the wording of the question, why do we continue to live in a state where the air hurts our face? Just wording it like that makes it sound like just living is suffering. Like, just like, right? The air, which is everywhere, hurts, you know? However, you're looking at checks, you're looking at weighing one thing against the other. And we're talking about, like, if you lived in a state where every time you walked outside, it felt like you were repeatedly getting punched in the face, I think you probably would move.
Yeah.
Like, so we never stopped to consider the fact that Kevin may live on Venus.
Or in the Arctic somewhere, yeah.
Oh, true. Yeah. The deep north.
Yeah, we're talking from our perspective.
Yeah.
Kevin, you should have included where.
Yeah. On Venus, the air is 900 degrees and it's sulfuric acid, and that will hurt your face.
That'll hurt.
It really will.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then it goes back to you don't have a choice. Like, you're stuck there.
Yeah. We've been doing this entire time assuming that the place where you live is cold. What if it's too hot?
I thought about that because, like, the other end of the spectrum here, if you're living in like a desert where it's so really dry, it's still gonna hurt.
Actually, I would
get
prefer
sunburned and
I would prefer to live in a desert than somewhere where it's really humid, like Florida or like Georgia, where it just feels like you're swimming through the air every day. I would rather live in a dry heat if I was going to go somewhere hot. So like Arizona would be.
I agree with that.
If you had to have the choice.
Yeah.
It's a dry heat.
I didn't handle, I've been to Florida once in my life and I didn't handle the humidity well. And when I look at people saying if you go to like Southern California or Texas or even Mexico, I know people have had nice vacations there, and I'm like, but it's like over 100 degrees during the day, and they're like, yeah, but it's not humid, so you can stand in the shade and you actually get cool. I'm like, that sounds better.
Yeah.
Go to Phoenix or something.
Yeah.
Right.
We drove through Flagstaff when we were on our way out to California, Justin and I, and Flagstaff is beautiful and it had great weather. That's like my ideal vision of like a town that I would live in if I were to move to Arizona.
Okay.
I've never been to Flagstaff, so yeah.
I just picture, I know that there is modern stuff in Arizona, but like I just picture the Wild West.
Oh, okay. I was like, where are we going with this? It's like, I just picture the people with the horses and the buggies, and which I guess, that is cowboy. Yeah.
If I think of Arizona, I'm thinking of like Tombstone.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is, there is, like, it still exists. Arizona is a real place that still exists.
Yeah.
Can confirm, have been there.
It's just not what I think of.
Yeah.
Airport's pretty decent, although there's some layout issues.
Well, that's just an airport.
God, that's true, yeah.
Come to think of it, I've never been outside the Phoenix airport. I've always connected through.
Oh, that's how I've technically been to Detroit in the same way. I was in the airport and a connecting flight.
Yeah. I've technically been to San Francisco in the airport with a connecting flight.
Yeah.
I don't feel like moving far away right now. Although, I will say, if I was given unlimited money and I was, given the opportunity to just kind of retire, I would move to a very little town right on Lake Ontario called Niagara-on-the-Lake. Yeah.
Any particular reason?
It's just so pretty, and it's like right there on the lake, and you could like drive to Niagara Falls and just sit around and watch the falls all day. And they have a really great tea shop and a cute little community theater, and it's like the littlest Anne of Green Gables style town. I love it so much. It's wine country too. They make wine right there in town.
If I had unlimited money and I had to move somewhere, it would be into a large castle on a mountain far away from civilization so that I could be a hermit.
So Denver.
So where would I go? Tokyo, maybe?
Ooh. These are all good. One of the things I think is very funny about the answer to mine in particular is that I chose a place where it's probably colder and a lot more snowy than here. Since it's on Lake Ontario.
I would like the Alaskan wilderness, I think.
It's pretty.
Yeah. I know people disagree with me. I like the cold, so I'm happy there.
I mean, I don't know if I could do the Alaskan wilderness. I'm from small town. I find I need something bigger. Anchorage, however.
I don't need my antibiotics brought to me by a sled dog.
Oh yeah, this is all like I'm really latching on to the money is no object thing.
Okay.
Because I want to be away from civilization where people can't get to me, but also I can afford like groceries and supplies to be like airlifted to me. So like, it's just leave me alone. Leave me alone and give me food. That's my whole goal here.
I think they actually pay people to live in northern Canada to make sure that certain areas do not stop being incorporated. So you could do that. They'll pay you to move up there.
And that's weird because living in cities in Alaska the cost of living is really high, but then if you live in the wilderness, there are places where you can get like you're an employee there.
Yeah.
I've thought about it.
I just like going to Niagara on the Lake. I haven't thought much about like, would I actually like it? I'm just like, I want to be here forever. If I was there for more than 3 weeks, maybe I'd start hating it. Who knows? And the lake effect snow.
Oh, lake effect snow. Yeah, that could be a problem.
Yeah. If you could throw a rock into the lake, you're going to get some lake effect snow.
Huh. It'd be interesting to experience, though.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we talked about this so long ago. There's like a weather research station on a mountain or something.
Oh, Mount Washington.
Is that it? The place where the wind is really high?
Yeah, like the hurricane force winds.
Yeah, and they do tours or something.
Yeah. I believe
I want to do that.
I want to do that too. Like, I don't mind going anywhere for a visit. The tricky part is finding the place where I'd actually want to live. Because of all the aforementioned reasons we've talked about for the last half hour.
Yeah, but if you did live there, maybe you'd get used to it.
I mean, you'd have to eventually, I suppose.
Or you would fail, and then you don't live there anymore.
Yeah, you get deported from your own house.
Who would be doing the deporting?
I don't know. The city is like the city that you're living is like, you can't live here anymore. You're just bringing down everyone's mood.
You know what? You gave it an earnest try, but you're gonna have to get out.
Yeah.
Yep.
The mayor comes to your door.
Yeah.
That's the mayor's job, right?
Yeah. Bonus points if it's one of those mayors that's a dog.
Yeah, one of the mayor dogs.
Yeah. I don't know how many of those there are, but I know there's more than one.
Well, there should be more.
Yeah.
All right, listeners, this week, let us know, what does it mean that Merlin lives in a state that hurts his face? Yeah, and if you have any thoughts on that or anything else that we talked about, you can email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com, and you can comment on our blog. You can tell us all the horrible places to live in the world's best world here. You can like us on Facebook. You can tweet @VaguelySci. Hey, Jim, where do we get all these wacky questions?
We get them from you, the listener. And if you have a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, you can email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. If you want to get our episodes the minute that they're released, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and all the other great places that cool podcasts like to hang out. And subscribing and leaving feedback really helps us out, and so does telling your friends.
And tell your friends to listen to the next episode in the future so that they can tell us about it in the present.
Yeah.
Who's going to do that? Who knows?
I don't know. I tried.
Our vaguely musical intro is composed by Anthony Pizzelli, and don't forget to check out our merch store over at vaguelyscientific.threadless.com. I think you've missed the holidays, right? I think this is coming out way after the holidays.
New Year's Day. Happy New Year.
It's New Year's Day.
Happy New
Year. Congratulations. We did it.
Yeah, we're recording in October, but Happy New Year.
But it's 2025 now. Amazing.
Woo!
That's real-time travel, baby.
That's real-time travel. We did it. Speaking of real-time travel, thank you to Chris for being our guest this week.
Always a pleasure.
Yay!
Yeah.
For Vaguely Scientific, I am Derek.
I'm Jim.
I'm Chris.
Until next time, Nanu Nanu.
Toodaloo, everyone.
Bye-bye.
I always wanted to buy the URL mostofaHorse.horse, but .horse domains are like $60 a year. So,
That's not that bad.
I mean, it's not, but for something I'm never going to use at all.
It's money
Yeah.
for nothing. So yeah,
And
I
the
get
chicks
that.
for free.
Like if I was going to do something. Yeah.
Well, we have to install these microwave ovens.
We've got to move these custom TVs.
It's a shame, really is. Okay, here we are. Dire Straits, you get out of here. We're not referencing you today.
Maybe you aren't.
Well, if you get in 5 Dire Straits references, then you're allowed to continue. But any fewer than that, and you're banned forever.
Well, crap.
I only know Sultans of Swing. That's the only other song I know by them.